Welcome to Inside the Chain, and today I'm joined by Davie Thomson, founder of Davie Thomson Limited, where your business focuses on your ability to be a performance architect, a board advisor, and transformation partner to your clients. Davie, thanks for coming on. And why don't you give us a sense to the listeners of who you are and what you do?
Do you want me to start at the beginning? Because that'd be a long story.
A long story. I started with British Aerospace.
Yeah. It's, I have to go back to the days when I had hair and less worry. No, I started, as I said in the previous call, Matthew, I started my career in procurement and finance at British Aerospace in Prestwick, where we made the Jetstream 31 turboprop aircraft. And that was a long time ago. That was 1981. That was my initial foray into the world of supply chain management and procurement and purchasing, and I loved it. I think I mentioned to you that I was part of a commercial training program at Prestwick, and the intention was to go around every department. But within about a month or two, I decided that procurement was where the action was, and that's where I wanted to kick off my career. I had a phone in every desk, and back to a young 17-year-old idiot. That was important for some reason. That that meant there was action, that you could talk to people. So I'd come from a department prior to that where it was just a blank desk, but having a phone in the desk meant that you'd arrived, bizarrely enough. The first sort of 11 years of my career was in and around procurement. I started in British Aerospace, as I said, then moved from there to an American electronics company, brand new greenfield site, new people, making vibratory test equipment for the electronics and defense industries. And that was my first foray into the world of TPS. So a colleague had joined us when I was at British Aerospace from Toyota in South Africa. He had whispered sweet nothings in my ear regarding Japanese manufacturing techniques. And coincidentally, when I was doing my IPS qualification, my dissertation had been on just-in-time and synchronous supply. And back in the mid-80s, the only person really talking about that was Richard Schoenberger. So I quoted him with abandon, shall we say, in my dissertation. I had my colleague from his ex-Toyota whispering in my ear. So by the time we got to Ling Electronics, so the company making these vibratory test tables, I was pretty much in bed with Toyota thinking, albeit I'd never worked there. And we set this.
Sorry to interrupt. What sort of timeline did you take from that starting out the procurement and realizing that's where you wanted to be, where it was exciting for you to as you say, that the sweet nothings and laying that sowing that seed?
It started. I started, if you start a stopwatch on day one, within by day 30, I'd worked out that I didn't want to be in finance. My next station in my journey was going to be procurement. And I stayed there since. So by the time Dave arrived and was whispering in my ear, I think 3 years had passed, 3.5, 4 years. So I had him, or the benefit of him, at British Aerospace for a couple of years, and then we both left. He became general manager of this company in America, in Glasgow, the American electronics company. I was his materials manager, and we set it up, as I said, around the appropriate elements of the TPS. So I said to you before, one of the principles that I'd written about in my dissertation, but I tried to imbue it in Ling, was that you should be able to see all of your suppliers from the roof of your building. And the rationale behind that is if I can see my suppliers, there's a very good chance that getting a delivery from them every 15 minutes isn't going to be a hardship. But if I was bringing them up from the south coast of England, or bringing them in from Ireland or France or Germany, then you ain't going to get just-in-time supply. So a key premise there was that you have to see the suppliers. I think I recounted a story about climbing onto the roof of the building one day just to test my theory. I reckon I worked out that 84% of the value of the system that we built was sourced within 1 mile of the factory. I could pretty much see the suppliers that we had. But it was playing at it. I had a lot of Japanese words in my ear. And to a young lad, I was 23 years old at that point in time. You think you're the bee's knees. You've got new Japanese terminology, but and in fact, I knew nothing, to be honest. And it was around about that time that Nissan had moved to the northeast of England. It had just set up. So in the procurement sphere, there was a couple of companies that you subscribed to, and you got job adverts every week. Percon was one of them. I don't know if they still exist. Another one was Tudor Recruitment. If you're in purchasing back in the mid-80s, those were the two sources of jobs and situations vacant. And they were advertising for procurement people back in the mid-80s from Nissan. And even armed with my Japanese terminology, I was kind of tempted, but it was a big move. I was very insular. I was very west coast of Scotland. Moving to big time England was an issue for me, so I didn't do it. So long story sideways, moved from there to Heister, again in forklift truck manufacture, but again in procurement. I was in divisional procurement there. Responsible for a range of commodities on a forklift truck, some of them from the European sphere and some of them with a global, shall we say, a remit. Bearings being one of them. Bearings was because the majority of bearing manufacturers was sourced in Europe. I had the lead role for the whole of the company across that piece. I moved from Heister to, well, it became Heister Yale, but I moved from Heister to another company called Bywater, water industry company, UK PLC. And I was the purchasing manager, group purchasing manager for with some global, not global, but group responsibilities across 4 manufacturing sites. Did that for a couple of years, and then the lure of coming to England and bringing Christianity to the heathen was just too great. So I moved.
In the continuous improvement.
Well, I don't think Christianity and Nissan go in the same breath, but I was suckered into joining Nissan. I'm joking. I owe them a great deal. Suckered to join Nissan in April Fool's Day, 1991. Into a procurement role. I was responsible for all electrical harnesses, instrumentation, fuel sender equipment, whatever. And in that point, that's when my procurement goggles misted over.
Really?
A fairly traditional viewpoint on what procurement was about. Every evolution of my procurement and purchasing supply chain development it showed me something that was wrong with the previous one. British Aerospace was the best of 3 quotes. Before the days of computers, everything was written into a huge, I think called a broadsheet. Today we call it a spreadsheet, but you compared your best of 3 quotes. That best of 3 quotes thing is hilarious because it gives a buyer a view that, yeah, I've done my due diligence. I've went out for 3 quotes and I've got the best one. I can hold my head up with pride to my boss and say I bought the cheapest that I possibly could. And therein lies the rub. I bought the cheapest. Now, I don't know whether this story is true or not. It's one that's done the rounds and it's had various characters and people attached to it. But when somebody told me it, that he'd been sat beside Neil Armstrong, one of these aerospace dinners, and Neil Armstrong was a guest of honor, and he said, "I'm going to ask the pub question, the elevator question to Neil Armstrong. He'll have heard it so many times of what was it like to take the first big step. I need to make my question really focused, really punchy, get him to think." This is how the story goes. And this guy who told me the story says, and I asked him, I said, "Neil, when you were on the moon, what was the thoughts that were going through your mind? What were you thinking? I know about this big step for mankind, but what was in your head?" He said, "Well, I walked around the moon's surface and I came back, and for the first time ever, I looked over the top of the lunar, the Eagle, the lunar lander, and I could see Earth. One of only probably 2 people, 3 people to have seen it from the moon's surface." And he says, "And over the top of the land," I said, that's the furthest I've ever been away from home. A lifetime in the Air Force, I was always far from home, but never 250,000 miles away from home. And then I looked at the lander. And this thing made out of aluminium, stick and string, and largely untested in terms of getting back off a lunar surface. And it says, and it struck me that this had been built by contractors who had submitted the lowest quote. And I thought that kind of nails it. Whether the story's true or whether the story's just, urban folklore. I have no idea, but the principle remains the true. And somebody else many years after that said to me once, Davey, you buy cheap, you buy twice. Yeah, because you'll throw the first one away. You're buying iffy quality. So here I was. I moved to Nissan. I was in a procurement role. I had the best of three quotes. I had more than one supplier. We didn't up until getting to Nissan. I maybe 4 or 5 suppliers of a given component, just in case. In spite of the fact that I'd written a thesis on just in time, I still had this hesitancy to jump out of the nest and trust that I could fly. And I had this nervousness about going to one source and whatever. I get to Nissan and we didn't have 2 sources for anything. We had no redundancy. In a time when Ford Motor Company had something like 4,000 suppliers in the UK, GM working out of Ellesmere Port and out of Luton had something like 2,500 to 3,000 suppliers. Nissan were getting by with 232 production suppliers. There wasn't 2 suppliers of alternators. There wasn't, we did have different tire suppliers, but that's slightly different. But we had one supplier, and immediately I thought to myself, what's the risk and what's the upside here? The risk is that if you catch a cold with a supplier like that, then you really catch a cold. The line stops, and back when I was at Nissan, it was like 14,000 quid a minute for a line stopper. So you don't want to get into that. So the risk, it was a very real risk that lack of supply would stop the line. It would cripple you in every dimension, and there's no fallback. And even if you could switch on a second supply in just-in-time deliveries, you're pretty much geared by that. But what's the upside? And the upside was that long before we thought about what we were going to build in terms of a car, I was already talking to you, Matthew McSharry. You were my supplier of a radio. I'd already gone through the tedium of what's the radio going to look like, how many channels is it going to have, is it going to be, what's the connector look like, who are you going to buy your connectors from, how long is the wire that attaches it to the number 2 harness, all this detail is going. At the same time as I'm having that conversation, that production's a year away.
Yeah,
it's way down the track. We're doing this, close in. Then we introduced the concept of target cost. That radio is going to cost you £25. You come back and say to me, oh, Davey, no way. No, for that functionality, it's going to be £40. And through a series of design gates and commercial negotiations, we change the design spec of what it is we're asking for. It's called target costing. We change the design spec, but not to take quality out, but we change it to get in order for all of our bought-in components to hit target cost. If we hit target cost across the 1,000 or so parts that go into a car, and the guys on the shop floor can weld it to the standard time and everything, then we will meet target cost for the vehicle, which allows our marketing guys to sell it at a profit. Because it's very market driven. The price of a car is £10,000. We need to make £2,000 profit on that. You need to go away and make that and source all the parts that go into it for £8,000. Prior to that, we worked in an industry where it's £9.5 grand to make a car. The market needs 10 grand. That's the market price. The customers will dictate 10 grand, and margin gets squashed if indeed you make any margin. And this concept of target costing was a kind of novel approach for me. I touched on it when I talked about procurement and Schoenberger back in the dissertation, but it wasn't a key factor. So long before we started, job one, and we get the line running on compose, we'd sorted out the cost, we'd sorted out the price, we'd sorted out everything else. We were good to go. And then every week after that, the quality guy would be in that supplier. The purchasing guy would be in every week, or every month, I should say. So in a month, the supplier's getting 2 or 3 visitations from Nissan, from the quality guy, the cost guy, the parts controller who handles logistics, and the standard number of parts in a container, delivery frequency, or whatever. So really well controlled. So by the time I bore up with my Japanese words in my head, a well-established process. I take no part and no credit for anything Nissan did in those days. They just shone the light on everybody. We self-build. If at the end of the week we sold 2,000, or we made 2,000 cars, and you were the tire supplier, we would bill ourselves for 8,000 tires and send you the money. And because we only had one supplier, I mentioned this story to you before, we had a problem once where there was some electrics being dug up on the same estate, in the same postcode as Sunderland site. And some JCB or a digger had chopped through the electrical cables, and the factory could run, but the systems, or the computer systems at Nissan had gone down for 2 days until they could get this thing fixed, which meant that we missed that pay run. We couldn't do the payment to the suppliers. So immediately a letter went out to every supplier, but that's easy because there is only 232. We're not trying to send letters to 4,000 suppliers all over Europe. So we sent 232 letters out saying, really, really sorry that we didn't pay you when we said. Tell us what we owe you. We've calculated 2 days interest on that payment. We will send you, give you a supplementary invoice for the difference, and we'll send that to you because we owe you for the interest. We had two out of the 232. I think we only had two companies that actually took us up on that offer. The rest said, no, that is the spirit that we expect from Nissan. And I went to a company. I'll also add to that story. I went to a company called Britax, or Britax, as they were famously known in the UK, in the south coast. And in their reception area, when you arrived at the company, they had their ISO 9000 accreditations on the wall, and Ford Motor Company supplier awards and stuff. To piece above their reception desk was this letter from Nissan saying, we'll pay you the difference. We're sorry, factors that with our control, we didn't pay you. Tell us what we owe you, we'll send you a supplementary check. And there's a memo beside that from the managing director, a manufacturing director, a guy called Laurie West. His letter was beside the Nissan letter saying, this is what we regard at Britax as being true supplier partnership. We would look after each other, And providing you didn't screw up majorly, you were assured of supply for the life of the model. Didn't guarantee me life on the next model, but we weren't going to go and chop and change halfway through model cycle. And model cycle was about 6-7 years. So you want as a supplier, once you won the deal to supply Nissan, you could breathe out a bit. It's still going to be tough to deal with. We weren't a charity by any stretch, but we made sure that you were protected as much as you can. And some companies actually came to us with costs that were below target cost. And we proved to them, look, if you submit this price, it's below target cost. You're going to lose money. And if you lose money, you're going to suffer. And if you suffer, you may go belly up in year 4 or year 5, just when we need you. So go away, have a look at your costs. This is what we think you should be paying. So don't say it's 15 quid when it's actually 20. If it's 20, say it's 20. Yeah, and we'll protect you. But as I said, the sourcing process started. It wasn't a normal. It wasn't an automatic guarantee that if you supplied the Nissan Primera, you supplied the Micra. It'd be nice to continue that because you know how we work and there's a good relationship there. But it wasn't a guarantee. But what we did guarantee was we wouldn't swap sources halfway through a program. That was just crazy.
I mean, that's a really great story, and it touches not only on that technical aspect of the costing and the target costing, as you say, and working towards that, but throughout it's the partnership that really speaks to me, and that supplier relationship. You don't have a business if you don't have supply and services coming in, and the example of the system failure and not the self-billing and not being able to pay, it shows that Nissan really did walk the talk when it came to living and breathing that supplier relationship, because it is a two-way street, isn't it? It needs to be win-win.
The key point, it's just something maybe worth just touching on. Back in those days, it's not the same now. I'm speaking of a Nissan that I joined in 91 and left in 94. So for your listeners, I don't speak for them right now. Things changed slightly as I was leaving. The point I'll make about that period was that comparative companies in the UK had a bigger manufacturing input to their car. Nissan decided that no, we don't make radios, for example. It's a bad example, but to give you, we don't make radios, so we'll buy that in. So that the dependency on the supply chain to be almost like mini Nissan. I wrote about this in my dissertation, which is why it struck a chord when I arrived. You need to see the supply chain as an extension of your own assembly and manufacturing process, and treat them the exact same. You don't see other automotive companies having 3 people doing axles. They've got an axle shop. They'll make drivetrains and axles and that. They don't have 2 or 3 internal processes competing against each other. So Nissan just extended that thinking into the supply chain. But that meant that you had to be on them all the time, because they were an extension from the design concept right the way through to supplying the plant. There was a design. It was also a partnership built in there that we are not going anywhere else with this. You are it. You are our steering wheel shop. You are our seating manufacturing shop. You are our exhaust manufacturing shop. And to underpin that, these factories were 1 mile away from the factory. These were delivered every 12 minutes. Exhaust systems from Kilsonic were every 12 minutes. You know, and that is literally like having it as part of your factory. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some people might say, yeah, Davey's not comparing apples with apples here. Hey, I get that. I know that, which makes the onus on how you work with your suppliers that bit more important. And the point I mentioned to you in the last call, Matthew, and it's something just maybe worth adding to this. I changed jobs at Nissan very early on, and I moved into a team called Supplier Development Team. Supplier Development Team was 6 guys who took thinking. At the time, it was called the Nissan Way, or the Nissan Production Way. It's currently called the Alliance Production Way. But my job in Nissan was, given the fact that the part that supplied Nissan in your factory was only probably 6 years old. It was visited by the quality guy every month, the cost guy every month, the parts controller every month. It was in good shape. But the problem we had was that, yeah, it's in good shape, but it's only a small part of the business. The rest of the business was supplying the rest of the automotive VMs, or vehicle manufacturers in the UK, who didn't perhaps take as what's the word we've got, as much care, I say that guardedly, as much care over the part supplying them as we did. SQA visits or visits from them, from the GMs of the world, the Fords and the Rovers of the world, was a beat-up session. I'm going to come in, I'm going to beat you up from some poor quality or some poor deliveries. You're going to get a slapping around the head. Then I'm going to go away again, come back in 2 weeks, and I want to see your improvement plan. That was kind of de rigueur how supplier development worked back then, apart from us. My remit was to work in anything that wasn't Nissan. So we had 5 guys. My job in Nissan was to go into the rest of the factory and get that up to the same standard as the small microcosm in the corner that was supplying Nissan. Because we saw the risk as being, it was more likely that through osmosis, the Nissan part would filter down to the lowest common denominator. My job was to get the rest of the factory back up. And you might say, well, that's a big statement to make, but that was the facts. So the electronic air suspension unit that goes into every Range Rover back then, I designed the production line for that on behalf of Rover, or I did it for Dunlop in Coventry, but I designed the cell that supplied that to Range Rover. I worked at Avon Rubber on hoses that were going to GM cooling systems for Luton, for Ellesmere Port, and for Luton. I worked on Saab lines. I worked on every single production line you can name for every VM manufacturer in the Western Hemisphere, except for Nissan. Only in direst of cases did we ever get pulled in to support the buyer on Nissan product. And the reason for that is quite telling. The team that supplied the team, did not want to be tainted by the cost reduction brush. Here they come, it's the other team, they want their pound of flesh. No, we don't. We're going to work on parts of your business where we have no commercial gain whatsoever, but we are mitigating a risk to your supply to us by getting that up. If you can make savings from it and charge that to Rover, hey, happy days. It meets your strongest supplier to Nissan, happy days. And that was the Nissan that I left. So we put something back into that process. We did definitely come in peace We didn't work. The supplier development team didn't work with every supplier that we had. It was very small teams, so a very small segment of the suppliers that we worked with. All of our courses, all of our training, we're open to all of the suppliers we had. So we regularly ran improvement manager training, Kaizen training, plant tools, everything to support the supplier. But we were in lockstep with the supply base. And the bit that I'll quote this story because it's nice and it's nice for me. When I left Nissan, I did see the winds of change coming. I'm not going to decry Nissan today, but it's not the same as it was back then. But when I saw the winds of change coming, I decided to go into consultancy. And a guy called Tony Bridges, who was the group managing director for Lucas Automotive Electronics, the top guy for Lucas, in UK, pulled me aside. He was in the plant talking to the purchasing guys, and he pulled me aside and he said, "I hear you're leaving." And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm going to go into consultancy." And he thanked me for being the toughest guy that he negotiated with when I was in procurement, because I would be the buyer for his products at that point. But when I moved into supplier development team, I also looked after Lucas. And he thanked me very much for all the time I'd spent on the Renault product line, on the Renault Laguna back then. Various other things that we did. And he more or less said, if it doesn't work out as a consultant, I want you to come and work for me. So have that in your back pocket. But if it does work out, then I want you to come down to Burnley, to Lucas and Burnley. We've got a ton of stuff that we need your support with, and we need your brain, not with a Nissan uniform on it. Now, forget the Davie Thomson piece in that. That's inconsequential. The interesting piece for me there was that I was promoting a company policy of partnership, that we mean no harm. We're here to help you, irrespective of the fact I've got a blue uniform on Nissan. You're very much part of the family. So when I come in, where do you want to go? Literally, which line do you need support with? Which area? Is it the machine shop? Is it plastic injection molding? Is it press work? Where do you need help? I'm your free consultancy from Nissan. That was the important bit. And to this day, I can't think of any other automotive supplier that does that. People will say, "Oh, we do supplier." Toyota will say they do supplier development. They don't do it on competitor product, right? Toyota supplier development work on Toyota product. I've stood beside them and watched them do it. So it's only, and I'll be honest with you, Matthew, I don't see it happening, and I don't see it even happening anywhere anymore. I think there's a golden age of that, to be honest.
Yeah. Has it fallen by the wayside? I mean, as you say, it's true supplier development, isn't it? But its value is de-risk. It has a value. It de-risks your supply base. It makes your suppliers stronger. It de-risks your supply base.
Exactly. And it takes a lot of trust, though, and you read stories with the move. Forget Nissan, forget automotive. It happens in other industries as well, electronics or whatever. But it does require a shift in your belief system as a procurement guy. If you've been brought up to think best in three quotes, my job is to secure lowest possible cost and be trained in negotiation. I always remember when I was doing my IPS qualifications back in the 80s, we worked it out that I think 10% of the curriculum was on negotiation. And in the Institute of Sales Management at the time, I think 90% was in negotiation. So the sort of the body of the kit, shall we say, a purchasing guy had to get his head around was a lot bigger then. So if you've come old school, you might be thinking, well, I've got to get 3 quotes, measure my successes, my cost savings every year, and whatever. Well, yes and no, it is, but from an early step, I was always conscious of total acquisition cost. And the reason I say that one of the things that brought it really home to me was when I worked at Heister, I had a small office outside my boss's office, and the plant director was a huge Dutchman called Herman Schumann. Yeah, I forgot his second name. Big Herman, his name was. He was massive. I'm a big guy. He was bigger than me, and he came into my office one day with an axle quadrant, just an axle stump casting for the drivetrain. And he threw it at my desk and he said, "What the hell is this?" And he blew up and he was ranting and raving, and "This is rubbish. You know, we buy these in Turkey and the quality's poor. Sometimes you get a hard casting, sometimes you get a soft castings. The guys in the shop floor don't know what they're getting, so they don't know what machine offsets to put in for machining these things. My God, what have you done? I don't care if you're getting it cheap." I said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't buy the castings. You've come to the wrong buyer." Right? That's point one. But the message that he left was that somebody somewhere in the organization, in my team, somebody had got a pat in the back for that. They'd resourced it out of France or Germany or the Netherlands or whatever to this. I'm not saying Turkey, it could be anywhere. It doesn't matter. The country doesn't matter. But they moved it to a Turkish supplier to get it at the right price profile. But we were throwing 30% of them in the bin because the quality, the porosity, and the tensility of the steel wasn't where, or the iron, I should say, wasn't where it should be. And that struck me, that we've moved away from a recognised transport route and logistics route, hubbing things through Nijmegen and Holland, where we had a site. We moved to Turkey. It's cheap, and we are incurring costs that the buyer would never have seen. That he's oblivious to that. If it hadn't been for Herman being down on the shop floor that day, asking the guys on the shop floor, what's your problems, lads? And they said, "This bloody casting." Yeah. He would never have brought it to my desk. I would never have known about it. And the fact I don't buy the castings anyway. And it struck me, total acquisition cost is the key.
Exactly. It should be owned by procurement, surely. On that, the value, the cost, not the value of the part, but that cost, the true cost of it, really important. But maybe there's a lack of skill level about understanding and the approaches to take to get that.
Well, there is a bit of that, but you are how you are measured. So if the procurement guys are measured purely on, last year, like for last year you spent 4 million quid, Matthew. This year I want the same supply or the same number of components, the same mix for 3.5 million quid. You'll find a way to get that 500,000. I'm being disparaging here towards procurement guys, but because procurement guys do know better. Our training and the qualifications that we go through to get to where we are do talk about this. But training alignment to how you're measured and what the objectives of the business are set is a different matter. When I obviously moved away from procurement when I moved to supplier development team, so I've still got that golf club in my bag, procurement, but with several other ones as well, and that move from pure negotiated cost down, looking at it, you've got to think more expansively. You've got to think that, oh, hang on a minute, what's my procurement cost? What's my scrap cost? Who's going to get this? Does that change the number of parts I bring in? I can get these in China, but I've got to. I'm away from daily deliveries. And I'm bringing these things every month. So moving away from pure cost to a more qualitative type viewpoint on supply chain, there's more to consider. There's way more to consider.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. And as you say, we have the professionalism within the procurement arena, and I think what I've seen over the past 3 decades, that my 30th year in supply chain as of this week, I've seen that procurement professionalism and supply chain professionalism has increased. It's quite rightly sits at the top table. When I look at when I started out, say 30 years ago, nearly, lowest cost was still really, 3 quotes, lowest cost. Procurement is about buying stuff, getting it as cheap as you can. And I think it has come a long way in being a lot more rounded these days.
That's a point you made there. The procurement community and supply chain community are better qualified than they were when I started out. They're more business savvy in terms of the whole piece. Sometimes the disconnect though comes from C-suite level, where you've got a set of performance results at group level or whatever level you want to be, and we need to do better next year, guys. So direct materials are going to be reduced by 10%. We're going to have to do something about our direct labour costs as well. So you start to look at the cost of sales. And then the procurement guys usually pick up some of the operational expenditure stuff as well, utilities, energy costs, dealing with scope 3 agreements or whatever, and recyclability. So it's a wide range of things that are going to be considered now. It's not just the I've got to get the direct materials down. I'm going to get direct material costs down, but also sustainably. I'm going to be doing that with sustainability now. I can't just be buying cheap rubbish from different sources. If it's coming, wrapped in 15 different layers of wrapping and cardboard and stuff, and it's all going to landfill. Until we get a tax on us in the same way as corporation tax, then that's a hidden cost there that's meandering around the corner at us. And the problem is when we set the goals for next year, we very not I say we very rarely we do. It's very difficult at times to get that balance. I love following the balance scorecard. I expand the balance scorecard concept to get people to think jointly about objectives. So the procurement guys, it's not just about getting direct materials down, but what's your role to play in the operations goals? Scrap, rework. Sure, what's your goals and your joint goals going to be with finance? Finance has said, we're going to get better collections from an AR process. Yeah, but where does procurement fit into that? And does it fit into that? And what about AP? Well, we're going to extend terms. Yeah, but hang on a minute. Whoa, now you're into real touchy territory. I can extend the terms with my suppliers and get them to finance my whole operation by moving to 120 days. But A, expect to be on pro forma rather soon. B, expect to be paying a price levy on that at some point down the track, because these guys ain't suckers. If you're moving me from net 30 days, which we both know is going to be 60 days, because you'll be trying it on, but you move that up to 90 days or 120 days, you're going to get the 120-day price. So the odds, the joint objective setting with finance, look at accounts payable and AP days, has to be balanced with the price that you pay and the discounts. The flip of that is, we might be giving money away. This is when I talk about the timeline. We might be giving money away because we don't exercise discounts that we get for purchasing and negotiate a 10% discount on supply for early payment. We give the early payment, but we don't collect the discount. Yeah, so we've got to be really tied down on that, and that's why I talk about joint objective setting. That's not about finance to measure and to manage. So objective setting, for this to be owned across the whole of the seniors or the leadership team, we need to be breaking objectives in a slightly different way. It's not about direct material cost reduction. It's not about AP days. It's about how do we get the best balance for both, because we might be able to take an inventory hit. I might be able to move you to, don't supply me every week, supply me every month. I want a unit cost reduction. I'll rebuild my inventory because I see a problem happening in Strait Hormuz, for example.
Yeah.
So by working with each other, the departments talking to each other, you build that business resilience where it's mitigating the risk by talking with each other, and it's about balanced objectives rather than departmental siloed objectives.
Yeah, and that may lead me into a question, getting into the technical aspects. When you go into a distressed, underperforming, or a business that wants to engage with you and wants some help, what are the first, I suppose, supplier and cash cycle questions you're asking?
I guess when you're in growth, cash is a continuum that runs through all three scenarios, where you're growing your business, where you're stabilizing the business, or whether you're turning it around. And it depends where in the distress cycle you currently are. If it's a case of, the banks are going to foreclose in 30 days, and you've got 30 days to turn this around, there's not a massive amount you can do. But the very first thing you can do is talk to your suppliers and say, "Let me a credit extension here." In the debt stack of things, suppliers are going to come quite a way down, but they're a good source of buying you out of the problem. And sometimes for suppliers, unless it's been going on for a long time and they themselves are in trouble, but most suppliers I've known in that type of scenario are willing to say, okay, we'll give you a bit of a holiday here. We'll take part payment, or we'll extend the payments we're on 30 days, you're paying 45, we'll extend that to 90 to give you a bit of breathing space. You also want to be talking to the banks. So the two recovery pieces there are suppliers to finance, and purchasing holiday. You'll be buying, capex is gone. Forget capex.
Yeah.
Any capex focus, you just forget that. Any leaks in the boat that you see water going out because water's cash is you need to be stemming them as quick as you can, and hope that you can run that like that for a good couple of months to buy some stability. But no, it's the exact same on the other side of the coin. You're trying to grow your business. What do you need? You need cash. And I've got clients looking at buying new factories or new facilities, and already thinking about, I'll talk to the banks, I'll talk to investors, I'll talk to whoever to get an injection. Yeah, and you're looking around the factory and thinking, hang on a minute, there's so much cash tied up here that you could finance that just by inventory reduction, point one, or collections. You're getting paid in 120 days. If we get that down from 120 days to 60 days, we half it. How many cash days does that represent in terms of your free cash flow? Back to the point, in the second book, I talk about this. It's called The Essence, but a bit of a plug there. There's a concept in that second book called comfortably numb. Pink Floyd, Pink Floyd song, but we operate generally in a comfortable numbness, that we can look at this inventory that's all around us that we've paid for and whatever, and it'll come out the sausage machine at some point, Matt. You don't worry, it'll get sold. But but it's easier to go to the bank and get another 5 million or an extension to a credit facility, or talk to the investors or whatever and get 5 million put in, rather than get your head, break out of the comfortable numbness and say, how about if I just switch the taps off from the procurement side, I use up the inventory that I've got, I reset my inventory balance, I'll look at my finished goods store and say, what can I move? What can I sell back? What can I run through? And sadly, what may I need to write off? Because as soon as you write it off, it comes off the balance sheet, hits your P&L. But freeing up cash by looking inwardly is always a better way to look at it than looking externally. And procurement's got a massive role to play in that. From the different terms with suppliers, instead of supplying me every month, can we get a weekly delivery? Can you do something on that front? I know it increases the transport, and it's a balancing point, because there is a cost to having weekly deliveries opposed to bulk supply. I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to go to every 12 minutes like Nissan did 30 years ago. Not in the slightest. But Toyota still do that. And Toyota, one of the most successful manufacturing companies in the world of anything, and they're growing their revenue every year. Lead time compression, cash release, are all things that purchasing and supply chain management can support in a big way, over and above just getting the direct material percentage of the cost of sales under control.
But that again, that's part of your arsenal, your toolbox of
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you mentioned there you're an author, the toolbox timeline and essence, and I like it. In essence, you talk about the least wiggly line.
Yeah.
And again, we never get perfection doing continuous improvement. We'll never have a perfectly straight line. We want the least wiggly line. And
I'll just explain that just for people maybe don't haven't bought the book yet. The straightest point, or the straightest way between 2 points is a straight line. And sadly, straight lines I have seen in manufacturing and in cash movement are unsafe, unregulated, and don't respect the humanity in any regard. I've seen videos, and I'm not going to name countries and stuff, but I've seen videos of guys pouring hot metal in open-toed sandals and, stamping things flat with their feet to make pressure cookers. And if that's your manufacturing facility, then you've got a fairly straight line. It's a short line that's straight. You'll lose somebody every year. There'll be fingers missing, there'll be injuries and accidents, and we don't work like that. We are regulated, but there is still a best way. I hate the phrase "the single best way." That's been coined to death, but there is a fluid and flexible blueprint that says this is the best way for the conditions that we are currently in to get material or information or cash from point A to B with the least amount of attributed cost, hassle, delay, or whatever. That's the least wiggly line that I call. We're still going to get fluctuations, and we still know them. Yeah, we have to buy. It comes from China, so we buy a container's worth of that. Because the question would be, well, that would be a straight line if you bought it from Billy Smart 5 miles down the road and get it delivered. Yeah, but it's 10 quid a piece when we do that. We can get it for 2 quid a piece, buying it from China. It comes in a container, and it's a monthly delivery. The cost equation there makes sense to get that as a monthly delivery. But that takes you off the straight line and creates a wiggle, a deviance. That's the essence. We're trying to create the essence, the least wiggly line through the facility. There's another timeline called the timeline, which is what actually happens. All your credit note action, all your reworks, all your delays in making decisions, delays in getting CapEx done, delays in getting people in. I need 10 more people, but the HR process is so long and long-winded that it takes 6 months to get 5 guys that work the production line. So you're working all sorts of overtime. All of these and you find that the line ends up oscillating wildly from where the essence is. And the difference between those two lines is what I call the drift. And that is cash or margin or revenue tied up in pools of time are all on that process. Cash, because it's an inventory build up. We've got material we don't use, but we've also bizarrely, we've tons of material we don't use, but we've also got material shortages. Too much of that, not enough of this here. I've been in facilities with 4 stock turns where there's still got material shortages, buying the wrong stuff at the wrong time, on the wrong forecast or whatever. We need to compress that timeline as much as we can back towards the essence. The drift is long decision-making processes, launching material early. I've got to keep Matty busy, so I'll punch in 3-4 new orders there because the material's available. And when the parts that I really want to make are available, then I can I'll break the line and I'll squeeze that in. And that just delays the royal train effect, just delays everything else. So I've done an article on LinkedIn that talks about this in a bit more detail and put some numbers on it. But the drift is all of that waste. And I've written 2 books on the subject, The Essence and The Timeline. The timeline is mainly about cash management and cash out to cash in. It was born out of a quotation from Taiichi Ono, the father of the Toyota production system, who famously said, I'm going to paraphrase here, but he famously said, all we are about is decreasing the timeline from order to cash by applying Kaizen and reducing wastes. And that struck me because I thought, I don't agree with you, Taiichi. You might be way more qualified in the subject than me, but I still disagree with you. I'm from Ayrshire, and it is my right. Because order to cash is it's an easy measure. If you're in a make to stock facility and I have it on the shelf and Matty places an order with me and I receive that and I supply it, I'll wait 30 days for my cash. That's it. But what happens in that regard, in a make to stock, nobody's looking upstream to say, yeah, but we took 6 months to put that on the shelf. We parted with our cash 9 months ago to give the service of next day delivery. So when you look at make to order, make to stock, assemble to order, engineer to order, these different models have got different impacts of what that timeline, this order to cash, actually looks like. Procurement's got a major part in that. Especially in defence contracting or in aerospace, where you're getting progress payments being made through a project till the thing's done. And how you negotiate that to make sure that your cash is being managed for the work that you need. But that's the timeline. And I thought, well, I've got to write a book about that subject because I disagree with the point. Not disagree. I think there's more to the point. And I don't want people to think they've arrived just because I get an order, I supply it, I get my money in 30 days. Well, yeah. But when did you spend your money? When did the money leave your left pocket for it to come back into your right pocket?
that's the key that you developed through your career, isn't it? To come to the point of being able to say the bus.
So
Um,
that wiggly thing, I say there's three elements. So I lose cash because it's tied up in inventory, work in progress, which gets stopped and started because of bad planning. Finished good stock, live, excess, obsolescent, or slow moving. If I'm experiencing a lot of downtime and my machines are broken all the time, and I can't meet the schedule because I've got long changeovers, or my machines are broken and maintenance, so I'm always working on that. I'm restricting my capacity, and that capacity turns into revenue. So the downtime restricts my ability to actually increase my revenue. And one of the first questions I ask people is, in your sales order process, your sales and operations planning process, how many inquiries do you actually convert? And they'll say, oh, maybe 50%. We're getting 100 inquiries a day. We convert 50% of them. All right. How many do you lose because of your lead times? Because if I don't have the uptime on the machines, I've got to extend lead time. The balloon, if you squeeze it, will extend in some dimension. So how many orders or inquiries do I lose in terms of order conversion because of a capacity constraint? Oh, 25%. So there's revenue to be had if I address that downtime, and that's another feature of the drift between essence and timeline. And then the last one is, if I take too long to do that, if I've got long processes, then I'm just going to burn hours getting something through the door. I'll need to be spending money in terms of premium freight, overtime, because now the machine's available. I've got to break that and get it back on there. That there just erodes your margin. So margin, revenue, and cash are all tied up in that oscillation we call drift. And you're right, that's exactly what I've been doing for the last 30 years in consulting, and decided that last year I'd just make that the focus rather than going to the other side, because we were quite a broad-ranging. Any challenge that's big and complex and thorny enough, we'll do that worldwide. And I want to really concentrate now just on that one element.
yeah, I love how you've distilled it to this in the essence. If you'll pardon my pun there, but that's what the journey's allowed you to see. You distilled it. Within those recovery models that we touched upon there, I know you've got timeline 90 stabilization and then a timeline 360. I think there'd be some real good value in just if you could just position how those two.
Sure. Well, the process, it's all. I didn't want this to be a sales
No,
pitch,
no.
but
Overview of the processes. I think even if
yeah,
people
well,
could
yeah.
in
You've heard the accent. So we decided to simplify it, doing the essence. So the essence for my business is that, based on data that we have worked with hundreds of clients, thousands of clients in the last 35 years, you're either recovering, either you're going in the wrong direction and you need to get back above water. And that's what we call, business recovery. Not always in distress. Distressed businesses, there's a few red flags. Banks may be foreclosing, and time is of the essence. But it may be that you've got half a dozen KPIs or dials on your dashboard that are blinking amber at you, saying, if I don't do something now, then in 6 months' time we're going to be in trouble. So and the way we find out that is through what we call a timeline evaluation. So when we conduct an evaluation, it can be a week to 2 weeks, where we work with clients to understand, is your organizational capability, is your organization structure and format conducive to getting you out or moving you through the situation that you find yourself in? So that's an organizational competency and capability diagnostic. Financials, we look at the financials and we do a timeline evaluation into the financials to understand where is your problem. Yeah, if you've come as if we think we need to recover, then the focus is going to be on where your cash is. I'm not about growing your business from 5 million to 10 million if you're going to be bust in 90 days. It's a hideous waste of time for everybody. So we look at the financial service. What is the situation that presents, and what do we do in the first 30 days, 60 days, and then 90-day program? So where's the pools of time collecting? And then the last piece we look at is an operational diagnostic. What is your capability as a transformation piece, you'll call it, a manufacturing business to actually turn product A into product A times 100, a gold ingot into something that's worth a lot of money. Well, that's a bad example, but you know what I mean. And that's the evaluation. Once we've got to the end of that, you'll have an evaluation that you can use and a plan, an evaluation and a plan that can use as your value creation plan if you're into PE. It could be just you want a health check in your business. You can say, come and do a health check. And that's you'll still get a plan with a heat map. It could be that it's a 90-day recovery plan that is required on behalf of the banks or the investors or whoever, saying we need a plan to get us out of this. But that's a standalone product in its own right called timeline evaluation. And at the end of it, it will go two routes. You're either recovering or growing. Nobody's in business to stagnate and stabilize. So you're either recovering or you're growing business. If you're recovering, you press the big red button, and that's timeline 90. And that's a 90-day reset where we will address the issues that were found in the evaluation phase around cash, margin, and revenue. You don't need to do that. There's no obligation. What we say to clients is that, if we've done the evaluation and that's all you want, then we'll charge you for that. And if you press the big red button, then the evaluation's for free. And we'll get on with the business of putting right that which we saw in the evaluation. If at the end of that you think, no, we're fairly stable, we still want to transform. You've confirmed a lot of our suspicions, but we need to be doing something different. Then we press the timeline 360 button, which is a 12-month program. It's one financial cycle, so you can see the differences being made towards the end of that, and we take our time to actually embed a lot more progressive thinking into the business rather than just a recovery. And I'll give you an example. We worked a principle called the 6E model. We've got a registered trademark process called 6E. The third E in that is enable. Enable in a 90-day sprint to reset your business. I ain't going to be training bunches of green belts and yellow belts and stuff to go away and fly the flag. We don't have time. It takes a week to do anything meaningful there, and we don't have a week. So enable might be, sorry, Matthew, you're fired. You're the guy that crashed this bus into the tree. So the enablement for things to move on might be that you need to just step aside and somebody else needs to take the wheel for a bit. Enable in a 360 though is training a bunch of people or the management team and the principles and behaviors that are going to be there for the future, and moving them towards looking at the timeline in a very different way than what you're to break out of this comfortable numbness that has enveloped them up to that point. So we spend a lot of time on that piece.
Yeah.
And we have skin in the game. We don't operate a normal consultancy model of day rates. We have skin in the game. So you pay us from what we save you.
It's a great model to have, isn't it? Again, it should be win-win, shouldn't it? And yeah, I like the 6E model in that there's that upskilling. I'd call it upskilling because we're training a methodology and an approach that works. That's the focus. It's not another fad. It's not good.
It's not a toolkit. There's some tools in it, but it's not a toolkit per se. It's about getting the management team, for example, to look at the timeline. Don't look at your part of it. Don't look at your silo and think you're doing a good job by increasing your little bit by 10%, because the whole system needs to move 10%. So you need to think collectively about the system, not one small part of it. I'm a huge fan of Russell Ackoff in systems thinking. It's pointless looking at your car saying, I replaced the front 2 tires because they were bald. I've got a fantastic car. If every time you fire it up, there's steam coming out of the bonnet and whatever. You've got to look at the whole car. Nobody buys your car because it's got great tires.
I agree. I'd try to consider systems thinking approaches and how that how the organisation is. Going back to Nissan and standing on top of the roof and seeing your network of suppliers there speaks to me of the system in a visual representation. If I were to finish on a couple of final questions, if there was let's say a typical 50 to 100 million manufacturer listening to this, what would you want to go them to go and look at tomorrow, Monday morning, let's say, in their own supply chain, if you were to pick one?
That's a good question. It depends on who's listening. If you're in procurement and supply chain, no, it's a good one. If you're in materials management, supply chain management, procurement, first premise is, think expansively. Don't think from your function. Think of it from a business perspective. The first, if I was to give you 3 takeaways, right, we use a quote, and it was on my old website, and it's a maxim that I follow. Tria facete, do 3 things. First thing is, look at your AP cycle. How well are you paying your suppliers? You are obligated. Your company, your finance department, and your business might have signed up to the early payment covenant in the UK. So don't be trying to screw your suppliers into 60 days if you've signed up to 30, because it's you may have signed up to something. But point there is not so much from that. It's looking at, is my supplier financing my business, and what penalties could I be, not penalties, but what problems could that be giving me? It might look good in terms of cash management, but am I paying a higher price for that service because they're bankrolling you basically? And am I losing? And in the same vein, when I look at AP, have I secured discounts that I'm not getting? Am I paying people early for a service that I'm not getting? So I've negotiated. I'll pay you in 15 days, Matty, but I want 5% price reduction. Am I paying you in 15 days, but not getting that? Check that. It might be legacy stuff. That'd be point 1. Point 2, look at your AR days. What is your AR days in terms of, and how does it compare to your AP days? Now, people get hung up in that one and think, oh, it's a customer. The customer's always right. No, he isn't, but he's always a customer. And by the same token, if they've signed up to the early payment covenant in the UK, then you are due to be paid to your contracted terms as well. Have a look at the number of people in your finance department. In a 50 to 100 million company, it might only be a small team. And the same team might be doing payroll, they might be doing management accounts every month, they might be paying suppliers, they might be chasing customers. Well, if that's the case, what's the likelihood if you've got 200 customers that you're chasing the right people in the right sequence to get the money when you owed it? And it's no use saying, yeah, but the system will pick all that up and you'll get paid eventually. No. You might be able to release in a 50 million business, you might be able to release 1, 2, 3 million quid worth of cash just by doing that. Cash is king. Never mind your price stuff. Cash is king. Third area I'd look at is your inventory in your finished goods. From a procurement perspective, it's lovely to see purchasing guys doing the shop floor looking at WIP, but your ability to influence that might be curtailed slightly. But in terms of finished goods stock, from a commercial perspective, you might be expected to help in the negotiations to sell that on if you can't use it, if it's excess or obsolete. You might have a look at your raw material stock at the same time to say, how do I turn the taps off here, and how do I make sure that my drip rate into the bathtub is the same as the outflow from the plug hole, and I'm not incurring excessive inventory in there. some inventory's fine. I'm not into zero stock and stockless production. That's in today's environment, that's maniac management. We do need inventory, but at the same time, we still need to be measuring, is my rate in the same as my rate out? And is my inventory working for me as in terms of insurance, or is it just a nice to have?
Yeah. David, that's yeah, after 2 I got 3. I thought I was pushing it at 2 maybe, but brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today on the podcast. So we'll wrap it there.
No problem.
Yeah, just to mention, yeah, your two books. I will have to see if I can get a link in, because it explains it in that extra bit of depth, the timeline.
For senior managers, that's the one to want, right? So that's one. Yeah, it's called The Essence, and it's a bit more esoteric. It gets you thinking somewhat out of the box a wee bit. It breaks this comfortable numbness element, because we just accept. And in this one, sorry if I'm plugging these here, but it looks like that on Amazon, the timeline, and that's all about a fictitious company who go through the rigmaroles you've just described, and how they use some tools and techniques and different thinking to address the elements within them.
I'm going to answer my own question to you now. I was potentially going to ask, if a CEO or listening to this wanted to do something differently tomorrow, what should they do? I'm gonna suggest they buy the timeline and the essence, Davey. That's
I would buy, if I was a CEO, I'd buy the Essence. Because the thing with CEOs is, and God bless them, I've worked with hundreds, if not more. Once you're up at that top of the tree, you've achieved Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You are. The good one will, not quite. I don't sit in a velvet cushion and go, I don't do that. But you're not there because you don't know what you're on about. And there's almost a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that I'm here, so I should know all the answers. But in general terms, and they're being pulled. CEOs are pulled to stakeholders, and there becomes a rigmarole, the dance that they get involved in. That maybe the Essence just helps them to look at that dance in a slightly different way. It's
a great way to finish there. So thanks again, Davey, and
not at all.
To the listeners, hopefully for tuning in, and some great lessons there and takeaways for people.
Good
Take
stuff.
care.
Thanks, Matt. All the best.